This video is brought to you by support from viewers like yourself through Patreon. This is the Dynaco ST70 from the vintage collection that I have, and this is the Miller Audio Dynaco ST70 with all the upgrades. Now we're talking. And if you're wondering, Jay, I don't even have a Dynaco ST70, I don't even have the expertise to do these upgrades. Well, don't worry whatsoever. By end of this video, I'll show you how you can get this exact upgraded Dynaco ST70 for a very fair price. Now, quick recap of the Dynaco ST70s, right? So Dynaco ST70s have been around for a very long time. I made a whole video about it because thousands, literally thousands of them sold since the day it launched. So it's undoubtedly one of the most popular amps ever sold in hi-fi. And it's a tube amplifier. It has that classic tube sound that people love, that I love. So a lot of people actually have the Dynaco ST70 as their first tube amplifier, and I was one of them. It was actually one of my first tube amplifiers that I've ever tried. And if I think about it, that's kind of what made me go down this rabbit hole with tube amplifiers. Now, there's a lot of things that is to love about the Dynaco ST70. For one, you can get it pretty affordable on the used market for about $1,000 Canadian or $1,000 US in the used market. So it's fairly easy to purchase one already made, and because they sold it as a kit as well back in the day, there's tons and tons of builds out there. But of course, it comes with a downside, and I mentioned that in my full video of the Dynaco ST70 original. Firstly, this amplifier is very, very old. So to get one in good condition, with all the caps recapped like mine and bring it back to spec, it's gonna cost some money to do it. And one other thing that I didn't mention in my original ST70 video is that, well, this amplifier, like I said, is decades old. So in that time, some technology advancements have been made. For example, like auto bias. That didn't exist back then. And what that means is that you don't have to bias it manually. You see, every time you try different tubes or you switch tubes, or after a few months of listening, you might want to go in there and adjust the bias so that there is perfect balance between the left channel and the right channel and the tubes wear out evenly. So these are some of the maintenance things that you have to do with tube amplifiers. And a lot of the times, manual bias is cumbersome to do and you might forget it or whatever. But this has auto bias, meaning that you can just plug it in and forget it. But aside from the convenience factor of the auto bias being there, there's other upgrades that come with the Miller Audio ST70, obviously. And well, one of the most obvious ones is that it's using high quality parts that wasn't available back in the day, such as Mundorf capacitors. Parts have improved over the years quite a bit. Now, this next part of the upgrade may be a little bit controversial, and that's because, well, tube lovers like myself love tube rectifiers. And so if you see my original Dynaco ST70, you see a 5AR4 tubes right there, or GC34. And that's the rectifier tube. But if you see the Miller Audio ST70 with all the upgrades, then you don't see that rectifier tube. What happened to it? Well, in this case, the Miller Audio ST70 is actually using solid-state rectifier instead of tube rectifier. Now, why did they do this? Well, there are actually many reasons for that, but one of them is that modern day tube amplifiers actually use a lot more solid-state rectifier than tube rectifier, and there's many technicality reasons for that. But even Dynaco themselves have moved on from tube rectifiers and moved to solid-state rectifier in the redesign of the ST70 in the 1970s or so, which means that you may have a vintage Dynaco ST70 with a solid-state rectifier if you don't have that rectifier tube inside your ST70. One of the advantages of doing this is the current delivery, which helps with bass and sag from the power supply. So if you actually watched my original video of the ST70, you will know very quickly that the bass presentation is more of a bloom. It's not necessarily tight or punchy or extended. It doesn't give you the same kind of bass performance that you would get from a solid-state amplifier or something that is really punchy and dynamic. It's more or less that description of that loose bass that people talk about with vintage amplifiers. But with the Miller Audio ST70, there's just a lot more control with the bass. There's just simply more control speed, dynamics that's just way more superior to the original ST70. Heck, if you watch my previous video reviewing the X2 from Borison, I actually put it against really much more higher end, higher priced solid state amplifiers, Class D amplifiers with that quick, unbelievable bass. These are amplifiers known for quick bass. And you know what? The ST70 from Miller Audio didn't fall too far behind. Now, other than the Miller Audio upgrade, there are other ways to get solid-state rectifier on your ST70. Yes, You can buy a solid-state rectifier like this one right here for relatively affordable prices, and you can plug it in where your tube rectifier was, and now you have solid-state rectification. If you've never tried solid-state rectifiers in your tube amplifier, this is a cheap, easy way to try it to make sure that this is something you want in your sound system before going full on board with the upgrades. Now, I do have to mention though, you may not get the exact same performance as the Miller Audio upgrade just because you switch to a tube rectifier, because there's other upgrades that come with it. One of the major ones being the larger transformer. And if you love tube amplifiers, then you know this. Transformers are the heart of a tube amplifier. Well, the tubes are the heart of the tube amplifier. The transformer is like the kidney? But anyways, you guys get the point. It's a very important part of a tube amplifier, and that has been upgraded on the Dynaco ST70 Miller Audio Upgrade Edition. And this upgraded, beefed up power supply allows you to now use 6 SN7s in the input stage instead of the original input stage tubes used in the original Dynaco ST70. They also upgraded filtration in the power supply stages, adding more filtration, because that was one of the downsides with the original ST70 is that it just didn't have enough filtration. And this all translates into a Dynaco ST70 that I would expect if it still existed today. This is now a really badass tube amplifier. Yes, it still pushes out 35 watts like the original Dynaco ST70. The power rating has not changed, but the delivery, the current delivery of the bass control, the bass amount, the dynamics, the cleanliness in the mid-range and high frequency, the refinement has improved all the way through. It is simply a totally different amplifier except for the mid-range, and that's why I really love this Dynaco ST70 upgrade, because that mid-range is still intact. That magical musical sound that you would get out of the original ST70 is why I recommended the original ST70 so much for newcomers to go buy one in the used market and try it out. When you pair it up with a sensitive speaker like the Tecton lowers, for example, that I have going on here, and other speakers that are sensitive like Klipsch loudspeakers, JBL, you name it, single drivers like 4-lane loudspeakers that I reviewed not long ago, OG Wise, the list goes on and on. There's many sensitive speakers out there that you can really crank up the music with the ST70, and you're looking for a good sounding tube amplifier. The ST70 gave you that mid-range magic that I look for in tube amplifiers, that holographicness that you quite can't get with solid-state amplifiers. Even when you compare it to much more expensive high-end audio solid-state components, that holographicness is something that is so hard to attain that it's just inherent to a tube design like the Dynaco ST70. However, a lot of the upgrades that I have tried over the years has either removed that magic in the mid-range or made it a little bit less holographic for my personal liking. It took away some of that tube magic. But the Miller Audio upgrade really simply keeps that mid-range magic intact. I have the original ST70 with me side by side, went back and forth. I was like, wow, that mid-range is still very musical, very Dynaco ST70, but the bass has improved, the dynamics have improved, the extension of the bass and the control of the bass have improved. The high frequency is still sweet, it's still sparkly, same thing as the original ST70, but now it's just more refined, more cleaner. Separation of instruments are better, and imaging is way better. And that soundstage I talk about with tube amplifiers, that wide and deep holographic soundstage, you get that just like with the original ST70. But now things are cleaner within that soundstage, so things seem a little bit less cluttered. Things feel a little bit more open and spacious. Even though the soundstage itself is pretty much the same, you get this really grand soundstaging that is more clean cut, and you can space out and tell where the instruments are much better than the original ST70. And to be totally honest, I've been looking for a Dynaco ST70 kit that would bring me a little bit of that bass cleanliness, because let's be real, that bloom isn't for every day with every speakers. So I wanted something that would clean up the bass a little bit, but keep that musicality of the Dynaco ST70, because that's what I love about it. Don't take that away from me. And that was exactly what I got, but actually with a cleaner presentation overall in the mid-range and high frequency as well, while keeping that musicality in the mid-range once again, which in turn improved imaging, sound staging, spaciousness, separation, and all that. So really, this amplifier is now comparable to modern day tube amplifiers out there. It just looks a little bit more retro and vintage and collectible, but honestly, it matches up with a lot of modern day tube amplifiers, and I'll go for us to say actually prefer it more than some of the modern day tube amplifiers out there because of that mid-range still being very much Dynaco ST70. And one last thing that I will say is that while 35 watts isn't a lot of power, the Dynaco ST70 Miller Audio upgrade seems to power and drive other speakers very much with more authority than the original ST70 thanks to that bass control and current delivery. Really, it's just a much more versatile amplifier now that's a better match with a wide variety of gear. And if you actually recall from my original video of the ST70, I recommended pairing the original ST70 with a modern day preamplifier, solid state preamplifier with a little bit more analytical behavior like the Dynaco Athena preamplifier or the Hades preamplifier that I have. And the reason for that was obvious. It was to clean up that mid-range and high frequency a little bit, clean up that bloom a little bit, and it gave a really nice result without taking that magic away from the mid-range. However, this is now far, far better. And now, because I have a much more capable amplifier, I can pair it up with a variety of preamplifiers. For example, if I want a warmer, richer sound with great sound staging, I can hook it up to something like this, the AudioNote Tube preamplifier, and get that large soundstage and holographic nature with a warmer tone, but without the excessive bloom I would have gotten with this pairing with the original ST70. On the other side of things, let's say I want a more analytical, more detail retrieval, more nuance in my system with great bass dynamics. Well, I can pair it up with something like the Dynaco Athena preamplifier once again, or something like the PS Audio Gold Stellar preamplifier if you want a more neutral but strong bass, and bam, once again, I have that. So like I said, it's just a way more versatile and capable amplifier now that matches up to modern day tube amplifiers, but still retains that Dynaco signature mid-range magic that I always talk about, the tube amplifier magic. Now, all this upgrade, if you want to do it yourself, is sold as a kit for about $460 US. Or if you are a pro and you prefer to do it manually, you can save some money and get the manual bias option as well. But let's say you're like, hey Jay, I don't have the time or the expertise to do this kit by myself. Can I just buy one? Yes, you can. You can buy the entire amplifier, the auto bias amp version for $2,150 and the manual bias option for $1,850. And it comes with really nice new old stock tubes in it as well. And here's one thing that I really love about it. So the Dynaco ST70 has this binding post at the back that is like screws, right? Because it's old. It's an old design. And well, I use these kind of adapters I got from eBay, and it's okay. It's the only solution other than you want to go for a pigtail. But if you're using heavy cables, it will sag, and over time, it's just not a very, it gives me anxiety. But the upgraded Miller Audio ST70 came with these, and these are just so much better. And I can't tell you how more convenient and satisfying it is to use this. So if you're a Dynaco ST70 fan and if you have one, and if you get nothing else out of this video, make sure to check that out because that's a lifesaver. And also, they're gonna be at the Southwest Audio Fest because they're out of Texas. So if you're going to that show, make sure to check them out. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll see you guys on my next video. Until next time.